The house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums and makes you aware of your own breathing. At 82, I'd grown used to silence. But this was different. It wasn't the absence of sound. It was the absence of trust. My hands trembled as I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty pill bottle in front of me. The label, smudged from years of handling, read warfarin, the blood thinner that kept my heart from betraying me more than my daughter already had. I'd searched every drawer, every cabinet, even the dusty corners of the attic where I hadn't ventured in years. The pills were gone, and I knew who'd taken them. Clara, my only child, had been in my home 3 days ago. She'd sat across from me at this very table, her eyes darting away whenever I tried to meet them. She'd talked about her job, her kids, the weather, anything but the truth. I'd felt it then, the weight of something unsaid. But I didn't press her. I never did. Maybe that was my first mistake. 40 years of loving her, of giving her everything. And now I was left with nothing but an empty bottle and a heart that felt heavier than the years I'd carried. I leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking under my weight. My mind drifted to the day Clara was born, a tiny bundle of warmth in my arms. Her mother, Ellen, had smiled up at me from the hospital bed, her eyes shining with a love so pure it felt like it could hold the world together. We'd named her Clara after my mother, a woman who'd taught me that family was the only thing worth fighting for. Ellen was gone now, taken by cancer 20 years ago, and I'd spent every day since trying to fill that void for Clara. I'd paid for her college, her wedding, the down payment on her house. I'd given her everything. And yet, here I was, staring at an empty bottle, knowing she'd hidden the one thing keeping me alive. The realization hit me like a slow, cold wave. Clara hadn't just misplaced my medication. She'd taken it deliberately, knowing what it meant. I'd seen the signs for months, her visits growing shorter, her excuses flimsier. She'd been pushing me to sell the house, to move into a nursing home, to simplify my life. I'd resisted, not because I loved this old, drafty place, but because it was mine. It was where I'd raised her, where Ellen's laughter still echoed in the walls, where every scratch on the floor told a story. Clara didn't see that. She saw dollar signs, a quick inheritance to solve her financial troubles. I'd overheard her on the phone once, talking to her husband about waiting it out. I hadn't wanted to believe it then. But now, with the empty bottle staring back at me, I couldn't deny it anymore. I pushed myself up from the table, my joints protesting with every movement. The phone sat on the counter, its cord tangled from years of use. I dialed Dr. Harper's number, my fingers stiff but steady. He'd been my doctor for decades, a gruff man who never sugarcoated anything. When he answered, I explained the situation in a voice that sounded calmer than I felt. Clara took my pills, I said, the words tasting bitter. I need a new prescription. Dr. Harper didn't ask questions. He knew enough about my life, about Clara's visits and her sudden interest in my finances. I'll call it in, he said. You can pick it up tomorrow. In the meantime, take it easy. Henry, don't overdo it. I thanked him and hung up. But taking it easy wasn't an option. Not anymore. I shuffled to my study, a small room lined with bookshelves and memories. The desk was cluttered with papers, bills, letters, a photo of Clara as a child, grinning with a missing front tooth. I pushed it aside and pulled out a legal pad. My hands shook as I gripped the pen, but the words came easily. I wasn't just rewriting my will. I was rewriting my legacy. The first lines were simple. Henry James Sullivan, being of sound mind. Sound mind. I almost laughed at that. Was I sound? Or was I just angry? hurt, betrayed. Maybe all of it. But as I wrote, the anger gave way to clarity. Clara had made her choice, and now I was making mine. The house, the savings, the investments, none of it would go to her. Not a dime. Instead, I'd leave it to the community center where I'd volunteered for years. The place that had given me purpose after Ellen's death. They'd use it well, to help people who didn't have anyone else. Clara would get something else, a letter, one I'd write myself, explaining why I'd done this. Let her live with that. By the time I finished the first draft, my chest felt tight, not from my condition, but from the weight of what I was doing. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The silence was louder now, filled with the ghosts of what could have been. I thought of Clara as a little girl, climbing onto my lap, asking me to read her stories. I thought of Ellen, her hand in mine as we danced in the living room. I thought of all the moments that had led to this one, and I wondered where it had all gone wrong. The next morning, I drove to the pharmacy, my old Buick rattling along the quiet streets. The town hadn't changed much in 50 years, same brick buildings, same faces, same rhythm. I picked up the new prescription and a cup of coffee from the diner across the street. The waitress, a young woman named Sarah, smiled as she poured it. "You doing okay, Mr. Sullivan?" she asked, her voice soft with concern. I nodded, though I wasn't sure it was true. "Just getting by," I said, and she didn't press me. I liked that about her. She reminded me of Clara, the way she used to be kind, curious, full of light. I left a bigger tip than usual and headed home, the weight of the pill bottle in my pocket a small comfort. When I got back, I called my lawyer, Margaret. She'd handled my affairs since Ellen's passing, a no-nonsense woman who'd seen enough family drama to know when something was serious. I told her about the will, about Clara, about the pills. Her voice was steady, professional, but I could hear the undercurrent of sympathy. "I'll draft it up," she said. "Come by tomorrow to sign." I hung up and sat in my armchair, the one Ellen had loved. The fabric was worn, the springs creaking, but it was where I felt closest to her. I closed my eyes and let myself remember the good days, the ones before Clara's visits became transactions, before I had to lock my medication in a safe. I didn't want to believe she'd meant to harm me, but the empty bottle told a different story, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. The lawyer's office smelled of polished wood and old books, a stark contrast to the sterile air of my house. Margaret sat across from me, her glasses perched on her nose as she slid the new will across the desk. "Read it carefully, Henry," she said, her tone firm but not unkind. "This is permanent. Once it's signed, it's done." I took the papers, the weight of them heavier than they should have been. The words blurred together at first, but I forced myself to focus. Every clause, every decision, was a step away from the life I'd built for Clara. The community center would get the house, the savings, everything I'd worked for. Clara's name appeared only once, in a single sentence, to my daughter, Clara Marie Sullivan. I leave a letter to be delivered upon my passing. That letter, still unwritten, sat like a stone in my chest. I didn't know yet what I'd say, only that it would be the truth raw, unfiltered, the kind of truth that cuts deeper than any blade. I signed the papers, my signature shaky but resolute. Margaret watched me, her eyes searching for hesitation. "You're sure?" she asked. "I'm sure," I said, though the words felt like they were tearing something loose inside me. I handed her the pen and stood, my knees aching from the effort. "Thank you, Margaret." She nodded, her expression softening. "Take care of yourself, Henry. Call me if you need anything." I drove home slowly, the Buick's engine humming a familiar tune. The town seemed smaller today, the streets narrower, as if the world was closing in. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw Clara's car parked out front. My heart stuttered not from my condition, but from the sudden, sharp pang of seeing her. She was here, unannounced, after 3 days of silence. I gripped the steering wheel, steeling myself, and got out. Clara was on the porch, her arms crossed, her face a mask of forced calm. She was 41 now, but in the morning light, she looked older, lines around her eyes, a tightness in her jaw that hadn't been there a decade ago. "Dad," she said. Her voice clipped. "We need to talk." I unlocked the door and let her in, saying nothing. The house felt colder with her in it, like the warmth had been sucked out. We sat in the living room, her on the couch, me in Ellen's armchair. She didn't look at the empty pill bottle on the coffee table, but I did. It sat there like an accusation, silent but deafening. "You've been avoiding my calls," she said, her fingers twisting together in her lap. "I was worried." "Were you?" The words came out sharper than I'd meant, and her eyes flickered with something guilt. Maybe. Or defiance. I couldn't tell anymore. "Of course I was," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You're not getting any younger. Dad, you need to think about the future. This house. Your health, it's too much for you to handle alone." I leaned forward, my hands clasped tightly. "Where are my pills, Clara?" Her face froze, just for a moment, but it was enough. A crack in her composure, a glimpse of the truth. "What are you talking about?" she said, too quickly. "I don't know anything about your pills." "Don't lie to me." My voice was low, steady, but it carried the weight of every sleepless night I'd spent wondering how we'd come to this. "They were here before you came by. Now they're gone." "I'm not a fool, Clara." She opened her mouth, then closed it, her eyes darting to the floor. "Maybe you misplaced them," she said, but the words were hollow. She knew I didn't believe her, and I knew she wasn't sorry. I stood, my legs unsteady but my resolve firm. "I've rewritten my will," I said. "You should know that." Her head snapped up, her eyes wide. "What?" "You heard me." I walked to the window, looking out at the backyard where she used to play. "You won't get the house. You won't get anything. I'm leaving it all to the community center." Clara's face went pale, then red, her hands clenching into fists. "You're joking," she said, her voice trembling. "After everything I've done for you." "Everything you've done." I turned to face her, my voice rising despite myself. "You hid my medication, Clara. You put my life at risk. For what? Money. This house. What was it worth to you?" She stood, her eyes blazing. "That's not fair. I've been here, taking care of you, while you sit in this old house, clinging to the past. You don't know what it's like. Dad, me, kids. My bills. My life. I'm drowning, and you're punishing me for trying to survive." Her words hit like a slap, but I didn't flinch. "You could have asked," I said quietly. "You could have talked to me. Instead, you chose this." She stared at me, her chest heaving, tears brimming in her eyes. For a moment, I saw the little girl she used to be, the one who'd believed I could fix anything. But that girl was gone, buried under years of choices I couldn't understand. She turned and stormed out, the door slamming behind her. I sank back into the armchair, my heart pounding. The silence returned, heavier than before. I thought of the letter I still needed to write, the one that would explain everything. I wanted her to understand not just my anger, but my love, my disappointment, my hope that she'd find her way back to who she used to be. But as I sat there, the weight of that hope felt like too much to carry. That night, I dreamed of Ellen. She was standing in the kitchen, her apron dusted with flour, her smile warm and familiar. "You did what you had to," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Now let her find her own way." I woke with tears in my eyes, the dream lingering like a ghost. I knew Ellen was right, but it didn't make it easier. I got up, made coffee, and sat at my desk. The legal pad was still there, waiting for the letter. I picked up the pen and began to write. "Dear Clara," I started, the words heavy but necessary. I never wanted it to come to this. The letter took hours to write, each word a struggle between love and betrayal. I sat at my desk, the morning light filtering through the dusty blinds, casting stripes across the page. My hands, gnarled and spotted with age, moved slowly, but my mind was sharp, cutting through years of memories to find the truth. I wrote about the day Clara was born, how I'd promised Ellen I'd always protect her. I wrote about the sacrifices, the late nights working to pay for her dreams, the quiet pride I'd felt watching her grow. And then I wrote about the pills, the empty bottle, the moment I realized my daughter had chosen money over my life. "You were my world," I wrote, "but you broke my trust. I hope one day you understand why I had to do this." I didn't mention the will directly. I didn't need to. She'd know when the time came. I sealed the letter in an envelope and tucked it into the desk drawer, next to the old photos of Ellen and Clara. It felt final, like closing a book I'd never wanted to finish. The days that followed were a blur of routine. I took my new pills, went to the community center to volunteer, and tried to ignore the ache in my chest that had nothing to do with my heart condition. The center was a lifeline, a place where I could still feel useful. I helped with the after-school program, reading to kids who reminded me of Clara at that age, bright, curious, untainted by the world. Their laughter filled the holes in my heart, at least for a little while. One afternoon, Sarah, the waitress from the diner, stopped by the center. She volunteered there sometimes, helping with the art classes. She saw me sitting with a group of kids, a book open in my lap, and smiled. "You're good with them, Mr. Sullivan," she said, sitting beside me. "They love your stories." "They're easy to love," I said, closing the book. "They don't know how to disappoint yet." She tilted her head, her eyes soft but knowing. "You okay? You seem heavy lately." I hesitated. Sarah was young, barely 30, but she had a way of seeing through people. I didn't tell her about Clara, not the details, but I said enough. "Family's complicated," I said. "Sometimes the people you love the most hurt you the deepest." She nodded, like she understood more than I'd expected. "My mom and I don't talk much," she said. "She wanted me to be someone I'm not. But I keep hoping one day she'll see me for me." Her words stayed with me long after she left. I wondered if Clara would ever see me again, not as a burden or a bank account, but as her father. I wasn't holding my breath. That evening, I got a call from Clara's husband, Tom. His voice was strained, like he was choosing his words carefully. "Clara's not doing well, Henry," he said. "She's been crying for days. She won't tell me everything, but I know it's about you." I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. "She knows why," I said. "She made her choice." Tom sighed. "I'm not saying she's innocent, but she's hurting. Maybe you could talk to her." I wanted to say no, to hang up and let the silence speak for me. But something in his voice, desperation, maybe made me pause. I'll think about it, I said, and hung up before he could push further. The next morning, I drove to the community center again. The kids were painting today, their hands smeared with bright colors. I watched them, thinking about Clara's childhood drawings, the ones Ellen had framed and hung in the hallway. I wondered if Clara ever thought about those days, or if they were just memories she'd discarded along the way. When I got home, there was a letter in the mailbox, not in Clara's handwriting, but in a scrawl I didn't recognize. I opened it, my hands unsteady. It was from Tom. A single page, short and to the point. "Clara's in therapy," he wrote. "She's trying to understand what she did, why she did it. She's not ready to face you yet, but she wants to. Please don't give up on her." I sat down, the letter trembling in my hands. Therapy. It was a word I'd never associated with Clara, who'd always seemed so strong, so certain. I didn't know what to feel: hope, anger, pity. All of it swirled together, a storm I couldn't navigate. I thought of calling her, of driving to her house, but I stopped myself. She'd hidden my pills. She'd risked my life. Forgiveness wasn't something I could just hand over. Not yet. I went back to the desk, pulled out the legal pad, and started writing again, not to Clara, but to myself. I needed to make sense of this, to put the pieces together before they broke me. I wrote about Ellen, about how she'd always known what to say when I was lost. I wrote about the community center, how it had given me purpose when I thought I had none left. And I wrote about Clara, not the woman who'd betrayed me, but the girl who'd once believed I was her hero. By the time I finished, it was dark outside. The house was quiet again, but it felt different now, like the silence was waiting for something. I didn't know what, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope, not for Clara, but for me. I'd made my choice, signed the will, written the letter. Whatever happened next was up to her. Weeks passed, and Clara didn't call. I didn't expect her to. The letter from Tom sat on my desk, its edges curling from being handled too many times. I read it again and again, searching for something to hold on to, a reason to believe she could change. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw the empty pill bottle, and the anger came rushing back. I kept busy, volunteering at the community center, fixing small things around the house, anything to keep my mind from wandering to her. But she was always there, a shadow in every corner of my life. One morning, I found a package on my doorstep. No note, no return address, just a small box wrapped in plain brown paper. Inside was a photo album, one I hadn't seen in years. It was Ellen's, filled with pictures from Clara's childhood, her first steps, her 5th birthday, the 3 of us at the beach, laughing under a too bright sun. I sat on the porch, flipping through the pages, each one a knife to the heart. At the back, tucked into a sleeve, was a note in Clara's handwriting. "I found this in the attic. I thought you should have it." I held the note, my fingers tracing her words. It wasn't an apology. Not really. But it was something. A gesture. A crack in the wall she'd built between us. I brought the album inside and set it on the coffee table, next to the empty pill bottle I hadn't thrown away. I didn't know why I kept it, maybe as a reminder, maybe as a punishment. That afternoon, I went to the community center. The kids were putting on a play, a chaotic mess of costumes and forgotten lines. I sat in the back, watching them stumble through their parts, their faces lit with pride. Sarah was there, directing them with a patience I envied. After the play, she sat next to me, her hands still clutching a clipboard. "There's something, aren't they?" she said, smiling. "They are," I said, my voice quieter than I meant. "Makes me miss when things were simpler." She looked at me, her eyes searching, You ever think about reaching out to her? Your daughter. I mean. I sighed, leaning back in the folding chair. I don't know if she's ready. Or if I am. Sarah nodded, like she'd expected that. My mom and I, we didn't talk for years. But one day, I just called her. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Sometimes you have to take the first step, even if it scares you. Her words stayed with me as I drove home. I thought about Clara, about the album, about the letter I'd written but hadn't sent. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe I needed to take the first step. But every time I reached for the phone, the memory of the empty bottle stopped me. I wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. A few days later, I got a call from Dr. Harper. Henry, your blood work came back. He said, you're doing okay, but your levels are off. You've been taking your pills regularly. Every day? I said, my voice steady. No thanks to Clara. He paused, and I could hear the weight of his silence. You sure about that? People make mistakes. Henry, doesn't mean they don't love you. I didn't answer. I thanked him and hung up. But his words gnawed at me. Mistakes. Was that what this was? A mistake? Or was it something darker? Something I couldn't forgive? I went to the desk, pulled out the letter I'd written to Clara, and read it again. It was raw, angry, but beneath it all was a love that hurt more than the betrayal. That night, I dreamed of Ellen again. She was in the backyard, planting flowers, her hands covered in dirt. You can't hold on to anger forever. Henry, she said, not looking up. It'll kill you faster than any missing pill. I woke with a start, my heart racing. The dream felt so real, like she'd been right there, guiding me. I got up, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, the album open in front of me. I looked at a photo of Clara at 10, her face smeared with ice cream, her eyes bright with joy. I wondered if that girl was still in there, somewhere, buried under the weight of her choices. The next day, I called Tom. Is she still in therapy? I asked, my voice rough from lack of sleep. She is, he said. She's trying. Henry. Really trying. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Tell her I got the album. Tell her, I'm not ready yet, but I'm thinking about it. He promised he would, and I hung up, feeling lighter but not free. I went to the community center, helped the kids with their homework, and tried to focus on the present. But Clara was always there, in the back of my mind, a question I couldn't answer. That evening, I sat down to write again, not a letter to Clara, but a list. Things I wanted her to know, things I wished I'd said when she was younger. I wrote about love, about forgiveness, about the kind of strength it takes to admit you're wrong. I didn't know if I'd ever show it to her, but writing it felt like a step, a small one, toward something better. The seasons changed, the leaves turning gold and then falling, blanketing the yard in a way that reminded me of Ellen's love for autumn. I kept the photo album on the coffee table, opening it when the house felt too empty. Each picture was a memory, a piece of a life that felt both distant and achingly close. Clara hadn't called, hadn't visited, but Tom sent occasional updates. She was still in therapy, still struggling with what she'd done. I wanted to believe she was changing, but trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. I spent more time at the community center, helping with the winter program. The kids were planning a holiday show, and I found myself roped into building props, a rickety sleigh, a cardboard Christmas tree. Their energy was contagious, pulling me out of my own head. Sarah was there most days, her laughter a bright spot in the chaos. One afternoon, as we painted a backdrop, She asked about Clara again. Any word from her? I shook my head, dipping my brush in red paint. Not yet. Her husband says she's trying, but I don't know what that means. Sarah nodded, her eyes on the canvas. Maybe it means she's scared. Scared to face you. Scared to admit what she did. I paused, the brush hovering over the backdrop. She should be, I said, but the words lacked the venom they once had. I was tired of being angry, tired of waiting for something to change. That night, I pulled out the letter I'd written to Clara and read it again. It was too harsh. I realized. Too final. I tore it up and started over. This time softer. Less about blame and more about hope. I want you to find your way back. I wrote. Not for me, but for you. For the person you used to be. I didn't seal it this time. I left it on the desk. Unfinished. Like a door left ajar. A week before Christmas, I got a call from the community center's director. Linda. Henry. We're naming the new wing after you. She said, her voice warm. The board heard about your donation a will. They want to honor you. I was stunned, my throat tight. I don't need that. I said, it's not about me. It's exactly about you. She said, you've given these kids a future. Let us say thank you. I agreed, reluctantly, and the next day I went to the center for the announcement. The kids had made a banner. Their handwriting uneven but earnest, Henry Sullivan Wing. I stood there, surrounded by their smiling faces, and felt something I hadn't in months' pride. Not for myself, but for what I'd chosen to do. Sarah pulled me aside after, her eyes bright. You're a good man, Mr. Sullivan. Don't let anyone make you forget that. I smiled, though it felt fragile. I'm trying, I said. When I got home, there was a voicemail from Clara. Her voice was shaky, barely above a whisper. Dad, I want to see you. Can we talk? Please. I played the message 3 times, each word sinking deeper. I didn't call her back right away. I sat in Ellen's armchair, the album open in my lap, and thought about what I wanted. Not what she deserved, not what I was owed, but what I wanted for us. I wanted peace. For both of us. But I wasn't sure if I could give it yet. The next day, I drove to Clara's house. It was the first time I'd been there in months, and the sight of it neatly trimmed lawn, toys scattered on the porch felt like stepping into another life. I knocked, and Clara opened the door, her face pale, her eyes red. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Dad, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't think you'd come. I stepped inside, my heart pounding. The living room was cluttered with her kids' things, crayons, stuffed animals, a half-built Lego castle. We sat on the couch, the space between us heavy with everything unsaid. I'm sorry, she said, before I could speak. I was desperate. I thought if you got sick, you'd move into a home, and we could sell the house. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't know what else to do. Her words were a confession, raw and unpolished. I looked at her, at the woman who'd once been my little girl, and saw the weight she was carrying. Not just guilt, but shame, fear, regret. You could have asked, I said, my voice steady but soft. You could have trusted me. I know, she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. I hate myself for it. I didn't say anything for a long time. I wanted to reach out, to hold her like I had when she was small. But the hurt was still there, a wall I couldn't climb. I need time, I said finally. But I'm here. That's a start. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Thank you, she said, her voice barely audible. I left her house feeling lighter, but not healed. The drive home was quiet, the road stretching out like a question mark. I didn't know what came next, but for the first time, I felt like there was a path forward, even if I couldn't see the end. Christmas came, and with it, a tentative peace. Clara and I started talking not often, not easily, but enough to keep the door open. She came to the house a few days after our meeting, bringing her kids, my grandchildren. They ran through the rooms, their laughter echoing like a memory of better days. Clara watched them, her eyes soft but guarded, like she was waiting for me to judge her. We didn't talk about the pills or the will. Instead, we talked about small things: her kids' school, the weather, the community center's holiday show. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. I gave her the photo album, open to a picture of her and Ellen baking cookies. Keep this, I said. It's yours as much as mine. She took it, her fingers brushing the page. I miss her, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. So do I said. And for a moment, we were just a father and daughter, grieving together. The new year brought changes I hadn't expected. The community center's new wing opened, and I was there for the ribbon cutting, surrounded by kids and volunteers. Sarah gave a speech, her voice steady and warm, thanking me for my generosity. I shifted uncomfortably, not used to the attention, but when I saw the kids' faces, I knew I'd made the right choice. The house, the money it would live on in them, in their futures. Clara started visiting more, sometimes alone, sometimes with her family. She was different now, quieter, more thoughtful. She didn't ask about the will, and I didn't bring it up. I hadn't changed it back, and I wasn't sure I would. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I wanted her to earn it, not the money, but my trust. One evening, as we sat in the living room, she looked at me, her eyes clear for the first time in months. I'm trying to be better, Dad, she said. Not just for you, but for me, for my kids. I nodded, my throat tight. I see that, I said. Keep going. She smiled, a small, fragile thing, and I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but hope. Hope that we could rebuild, not the past, but something new. I still kept my pills in a safe, a habit I couldn't break. But I started leaving the door unlocked when Clara came over. A small gesture, a step toward trust. The letter I'd written stayed in the drawer, unfinished but not forgotten. Maybe one day I'd give it to her. Or maybe I'd write a new one. One that spoke of healing instead of hurt. As winter turned to spring, I spent more time in the garden, planting flowers like Ellen used to. Clara helped sometimes, her hands in the dirt, her kids running around us. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. I thought of Ellen, of her words in my dreams, and knew she'd be proud not of the will, not of the anger, but of these small moments of trying. The empty pill bottle still sat on the coffee table, a reminder of what we'd lost, but also of what we could still find. I didn't throw it away. Not yet. It was part of our story, and I wasn't done writing it.